Number 22. Okay, cool. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. When he declared them in open rebellion. All the smart kids write that down. That's incredible. That's amazing. They're going to know all kinds of things. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. Once the king declared an open rebellion, he sent the troops to do the job of suppressing it violently. Yes, buddy? No, there's going to be recording going home to the kids that aren't here. You're taking notes right here in class. It's a beautiful thing. Yes, ma'am. When he declared them in open rebellion. Sawyer. Sawyer? Yes. I think I just gave you a pen yesterday. Okay, this shouldn't be a daily thing, son. Okay, I mean I have a lot of pens, but you know, down to not that many pens. Are you ready? I'm throwing this at you, okay, not to you, just so you understand. Here we go. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. Who would those mercenaries be? Hessians. Hessians, capital Hessians, capital Hessians. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. The British Navy had this thing where anywhere in the British Empire, if they needed sailors, they just took people. It was called impressment. I mean, literally, if they met a French ship off the coast of North Carolina and they fought a battle and the British ship lost 10 men. Well, ships don't carry extra sailors. That means they're 10 people short to run their ship properly. They would literally send a boat ashore with an officer and a few big strong guys, and they see Gus walking along. And they might just knock him over the head. And when Gus woke up, he was in the bottom of a British ship, which was now 40 miles out to sea. So they say, you're in the British Navy. And Gus says, no, I'm just a farmer. I'm just going home. I got a wife and kids over there. No. You're in the British Navy. Well, no, really, no, I didn't sign up for this. And the answer is the British Navy used this lovely little whip that's separated into 9 things called a cat of nine tails. And you could get lots and lots and lots of whippings for disobeying. So they say, okay, here's your first duty in the British Navy. And he said, no, I'm not in the British Navy. Okay, give him 10 lashes. Okay, give him 10 more lashes if he's still not obeying. Eventually, Gus is going to say, I guess I'm in the British Navy. They may take him all over the world. Maybe the first chance he has to escape is in Australia. How's he ever going to get home? Maybe he doesn't get a chance to escape. He just says, well, I don't know, my kids would be grown up. My wife's probably dead. I guess it's just in the British Navy. So this is kind of an awful thing, just grabbing people and, hey, your king and country need you, so now you're in the Navy. All righty, what else do we got here? He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. The Indians scalped people. They cut off the top parts of their hair, kind of ripped it off with their teeth. It was a hideous, horrible, really scary thing. That was like the biggest fear on the frontier. And remember, these guys could move through the woods so silently, you didn't see it coming. And they would put these things up as displays of how powerful a warrior they were. And as a result, they would take, if you had a nice long thing of hair there, boy, you got Annalise with that nice long scalp. Well, they'd be happy to take that hair and put it up on the lodge pole. And, I'm probably safe. But, I mean, they do it, men, women, children, didn't matter. It showed that you killed an enemy. And then again, we had a little problem with this because there were times when they couldn't tell one white guy from another guy, so they might kill some of the British, certainly some of the loyalists. But anyways, the king turned them loose. We'll talk more about that later. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Petition for redress meant ask for help. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. We begged to have these problems solved, and yet all we get are more problems. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Remember, they're making this list for the rest of the world to explain why they think they can do this. And they said, all right, here's a list of all the things that the king has done. Well, he's done so many things for so long to us repeatedly, even when we begged him to stop, that he's really not fit to be the ruler of a free people. He just wants to be a dictator. Nor have we been wanting in our attentions to our British brethren. So we didn't just talk to the king. We've also sent letters to Parliament. We've also published things in newspapers in Britain. We've asked the British people themselves. We've warned them from time to time of the attempts of their legislature, to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We said, hey, these guys are trying to make terrible laws without giving us any say. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. That's big. They said, look, we were British. We were happy. We were living over in Britain. And then we came over to the colonies for the benefit of the British Empire. And now we're being treated so horribly. Remember, we're doing this for you. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity. We have conjured them by our ties of common kindred to disavow these usurpations. We've said, come on, we're brothers. We're all British. Please help us get out of these problems, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. Because if we don't get out of these problems, we're going to have to break it off. We can't stand to live like this. They too had been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity, so they haven't helped us either. Deaf to justice, consanguinity means having the same blood. Okay, so because we're brothers, we're family. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation. We have to give up. We can't take this any longer. We're going to have a revolution. And hold them as we hold the rest of mankind. Enemies in war, in peace, friends. So it's not like saying we're going to hate the British. We're just saying we can't stand being under their thumb anymore. So we need to be a separate country. And once we're a separate country, we'll be happy to be friends with their nation or enemies in war if that's what it takes. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, appealing to the supreme judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, who's that? God. Do in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies. Remember, they're doing it in the name of the people of the colonies. That's natural rights philosophy again. The people create a government to protect their rights. Solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British crown, don't owe Britain anything, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. We have no allegiance to them, we have no connection to them. And that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. So that's the Declaration of Independence. And then the other thing you need to be aware of, let's see here. Obviously, oh, come on now, where are you hiding? No, Button Gwinnett. Yeah, you go, Georgia. Button Gwinnett, man. How can you not love a guy whose name is Button? All right, Button Gwinnett. Now, that last line, our lives, our fortunes, our sacred honor, they pledge to each other. Nowadays, that's kind of gone away. We have an interesting world we live in now. The interesting world we live in now says, oh, you know how you tell if a person is good or bad? Well, it's not whether they give their word and keep it. What it really is you got a credit score. Somewhere on a computer, banks and businesses have assigned you a number. You have a number. And if you pay your loans back and everything, it's not that you're an honest person, it's that your number goes up. And if you don't, your number goes down. Now, it used to be that people didn't travel around so much in their lifetime. So that if Tanvi is born around here, she will probably live her whole life within maybe 20 miles of here. Probably never get any further. And so everybody knows her that she would do business with. They know if she's honest, they know if she's good. So she has her reputation. So being honest and giving your word on something was so incredibly important. It still is, but people don't seem to see it in the same way. This is huge. When these people said, we pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Let me read you a little something here. Just going to read excerpts of this. A total of 86 alterations were made, almost 500 words were eliminated, leaving 1,337. At last, after 3 days of wrangling, the document was put to a vote. On July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was adopted. What kind of men were the 56 signers who, in adopting the Declaration of Independence, by their signing, committed an act of treason against the crown? It's not a question, I'm just reading. Ben Franklin was the only really old man. 18 were under 40, 3 were in their 20s. Of the 56, almost half, 24 were judges and lawyers, 11 were merchants, 9 were landowners. Look up. Look up. Listen. Okay. And farmers, and the remaining 12 were doctors, ministers, and politicians. These were men of substantial property. All but 2 had families. John Hancock, one of the richest men in America, already had a price of 500 pounds on his head. Ben Franklin wryly noted, indeed, we must all hang together, otherwise we shall most assuredly hang separately. Meaning we got to hang together or we will hang separately. Fat Benjamin Harrison of Virginia told tiny Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts, with me it'll all be over in a minute, but you'll be dancing on air an hour after I'm gone. The fat guy, you hang him, he's dead. The little guy gets to bounce around for a while. It was principle, not property, that brought these men to Philadelphia. 2 of them became presidents of the United States. 7 of them became state governors. 1 died in office as vice president of the United States. Several would go on to be U.S. senators. 1, the richest man in America in 1828, founded the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. 1, a delegate from Philadelphia, was the only real poet, musician, and philosopher of the signers. It was he, Francis Hopkinson, not Betsy Ross, who designed the United States flag. Though the resolution was formally adopted July 4th, it was not until July 8th that 2 of the states authorized their delegates to sign. And it was not until August 2nd that the signers met at Philadelphia to actually put their names on the Declaration. Stephen Hopkins, a man past 60, as he signed with shaking pen, declared, "My hand trembles, but my heart does not." The British marked down every member of Congress suspected of having put his name to this treason. All of them were the objects of vicious manhunt. Francis Lewis, New York delegate, saw his home plundered and his estate in what's now Harlem completely destroyed by British soldiers. Mrs. Lewis was captured and treated with great brutality, though she was later exchanged for 2 British prisoners. Through the efforts of Congress, she died from the effects of the abuse. William Floyd, another New York delegate, was able to escape with his wife and children across Long Island Sound to Connecticut, where they lived as refugees without income for 7 years. When they came home, they found a devastated ruin. Lewis Morris, the 4th New York delegate, saw all his timber, crops, and livestock taken. For 7 years, he was barred from his home and family. John Hart of Trenton, New Jersey, risked his life to return home to see his dying wife. Hessian soldiers rode after him, and he escaped in the woods. While his wife lay on her deathbed, the soldiers ruined his farm and wrecked his homestead. Hart, 65, slept in caves and woods as he was hunted across the countryside. When at last, emaciated by hardship, he was able to sneak home, He found his wife had already been buried and his 13 children taken away. He never saw them again. He died a broken man in 1779 without ever finding his family. Dr. John Witherspoon Steiner was the president of the College of New Jersey, later called Princeton. The British occupied the town of Princeton and billeted troops in the college. They trampled and burned the finest college library in the country. John Stockton was pulled from his bed in the night and brutally beaten by the arresting soldiers. Thrown into a common jail, he was deliberately starved. Congress finally arranged for Stockton's parole, but his health was ruined. The judge was released as an invalid when he could no longer harm the British cause. He returned home to find his estate looted and did not live to see the triumph of the Revolution. His family was forced to live off charity. Thomas Lynch Jr., South Carolina delegate, had his health broken by privation and exposure while serving as a company commander in the military. His doctors ordered him to seek a cure in the West Indies, and on the voyage, he and his young bride drowned at sea. Thomas Nelson, Steiner of Virginia, was at the front in command of the Virginia military forces. With British General Cornwallis in Yorktown, fire from 70 heavy American guns began to destroy Yorktown piece by piece. Lord Cornwallis and his staff moved their headquarters into Nelson's palatial home. While American cannonballs were making a shambles of the town, the house of Governor Nelson was spared. Nelson turned in rage to the American gunners and asked, "Why do you spare my home?" They replied, "Sir, out of respect to you." Nelson cried, "Give me the cannon," and fired on his own magnificent home, smashing it to bits. Of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence, 9 died of wounds or hardship during the war. 5 were captured or imprisoned, in each case with brutal treatment. Several lost wives, sons, or entire families. One lost his 13 children. 2 wives were brutally treated. All were at one time or another the victims of manhunt and driven from their homes. 12 signers had their homes completely burned. 17 lost everything they owned, yet not one defected or went back on its pledged word. Their honor and the nation they sacrificed so much to create is still intact. And finally, there's New Jersey signer Abraham Clark. He gave 2 sons to the officer corps of the Revolutionary Army. They were captured and sent to the infamous British prison hulk afloat in New York Harbor, known as the Hell Ship Jersey, where 11,000 American captives were to die. The younger Clarks were treated with special brutality because of their father. One put in solitary confinement and given no food. With the end almost in sight, with the war almost won, no one could have blamed Abraham Clark for acceding to the British request when they offered him his sons' lives if he would recant and come up for king and parliament. The utter despair in the man's heart, the anguish in his very soul must reach out to each one of us down through 200 years with his answer, no. The 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence proved by their every deed that they made no idle boast when they composed the most magnificent curtain line in history. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Just think about the dedication to the cause, the belief that I have given my word and I'm working for liberty and I'm working not just for my own freedom, but for that of my children and their children and everyone else's too. So here you have this man, this Abraham Clark. Turn it around so you guys can understand it. Okay? You've given your word to support a cause. And somebody says, say it was wrong and your mother lives. Otherwise she dies. And he said, no, I've given my word. That's sacred. I've said I would do this thing. I will do this thing. So that's kind of an amazing, amazing bit of dedication. All right, tiny people. Chloe, you cut that off right